Welcome back. This is Robin Minds. Before we went on the break, we're talking about men's health, and of course, we're celebrating International Men's Day. If you have a man in your life, please buy that man a gift today, okay? I'm serious. Just really buy that man a gift today. Now, let's move on to entertainment. Entertainment shapes how society thinks about gender, power, identity, and relationships. But the question is, are our stories equitable? For decades, TV and film have centered men as heroes, leaders, and decision makers, while women are often cast into limited roles, love interests, victims, or homemakers. Today's audience is more conscious, we are more critical, and we're more demanding. People want stories that reflect real life, complex women, vulnerable men, balanced narratives, and characters that break stereotypes. This conversation explores how Nollywood, Afrobeat visuals, digital creators, and mainstream entertainment can move beyond gender bias to embrace storytelling that is fair, authentic, and representative. The goal is to examine the impact of outdated tropes, highlight the need for inclusive writers' room, and discuss how equity improves creativity, business, and cultural impact. To discuss this, joining me from our Lagos studio is a media personality and screenwriter, Jola Ayeye. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
How is Lagos today? How's the weather?
Lagos is Lagos. It's warm. Well, it's hot actually.
Well, I'd like to inform you that I got to Channels Television Abuja studio in 4 minutes, and I was about 5 kilometers away. Lagos people cannot relate, but that's not what the conversation is about. So, what does gender equity and representation mean to you when it comes to entertainment?
So I think there's a lot of discussion about equality and equity, and wondering if it's just semantics or people are kind of trying to find a new way to complain about the same thing, but it's quite different. So equality is making sure people have access to the same things, the same resources. And equity is making sure that people are reached according to their needs. So for instance, I'm not a very tall woman. If I needed to see what was happening over a fence and I was giving the same sort of stool as someone who is much taller, I might not actually still be able to see over the fence. What would be equitable is to make sure that the stool is sort of made to measure, make sure that I'm actually able to see over the fence, the same way someone who is taller wouldn't need such a high stool. So yeah, equity is something different, and equitable storytelling is important, and it means that people are reflected in a way that makes society think about how to make the world fairer or see what the world looks like for people from different perspectives. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
So with that definition, yes, totally. With that definition now, do you think across film, television, online content, you think all genders are equitably represented?
I would say we're making good progress. Like you did say, the audiences are getting more technical, they're more hungry, they want to see themselves reflected, they want to see life reflected. So I do think that we're making very good progress compared to where Nollywood, music, books were 20, 30, 10, even 5 years ago. And so we're working towards it because it's a gradual process. So you don't just get the kind of social change you want automatically. It takes time. People experience life differently. Opportunities open up slowly. And so everyone from screenwriters to directors and producers are learning over time how to create, explore, and present new and alternative storylines, showing people in the fullness of who they are.
So you're a screenwriter. Has there ever been a situation whereby an executive producer asked you to tweak a script simply because of his or her idea of storytelling did not exactly reflect what you wrote, especially when it comes to gender?
Not exactly. So what tends to happen, what has happened in my experience is a back and forth. So if you write something and an executive producer, a director, a producer has a different viewpoint, there does tend to be sort of like a discussion, like, why do you see it this way? And this is how I see it. This is what I believe should be happening. This is what we can't do with our budget. So very often it's a discussion, it's a back and forth. I haven't really had very many situations, if any actually. If I'm being honest, I haven't had any situations where what I wrote doesn't end up on screen. with the intention that was had behind it. There have been changes, but there's always a discussion about why they think something needs to be changed. What do I think? Should we go back and forth? Is there something I'm not looking at? Is there something they're not looking at? And what's the aim of the story at the end of the day? So if I'm being perfectly honest, I've been lucky enough not to have that experience. But it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. In fact, it happens quite often.
Okay, so now what are the stereotypes you think we need to break or debunk when it comes to creative storytelling, especially across film and what have you, like any sort of creative space? What are the major stereotypes you think we need to break?
I think our understanding of people's intentions. I do think a lot of our storytelling has been pushed towards primarily just simple, basic moral messaging, and it doesn't allow us to explore why people do what they do and how they do what they do. So that's how you kind of end up with these one-dimensional stories. But I do think women as primarily weak or unable to lead, unable to own their own decisions, the lack of autonomy is something that I do think is important. And just the one-dimensional nature of either men or women. So seeing men as they're always strong, or they're angry, or they're basic and they're simple. Everything is straightforward. They are leaders. They don't have fears. They don't have anxieties. They don't make, their mistakes are made from a very one-dimensional place. So I do think a lot of the stereotypes I worry about always come from the idea of, I don't know, man good, woman bad, man bad, woman good. Man wants money, woman wants security. Very basic, simple ideology. And so I do think that over time, we need to get rid of those sort of stereotypes.
Okay. I like the fact that you did insinuate gender bias, in the creative space. I want to particularly talk about the music industry, So how does gender bias show up in musical lyrics, and how artists are branded and how artists are portrayed, Oh, if you're a female artist, you need to have some sort of sex appeal, and et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, a good place for that conversation would be to ask who does make these decisions about how artists are portrayed and why, who decides what women need to look like in order to be successful, who decides what sort of lyrics make sense, who decides what music videos look like. And that's why we talk about equity, not just in the end product, but in decision making. And because I'm not an artist, I can't speak on their behalf, but I do enjoy music a lot. And I just wish there was more equity in opportunity, so in behind the camera, because a lot of people do see the end product. But I always think about who are the music executives, who are the video directors, who writes the music videos, who has the final sign-off on budgets, who decides what's important, who decides how an artist looks and sounds. And those things are really important. So before we get to sort of like the end product, I always want us to discuss who starts off making these decisions and how do they get there, and how do we open up the space so that there are other types of voices who get into the room and are able to make these decisions, right? Yeah.
I like that. You did mention that we're seeing progress. This is not something that will just happen overnight. But do you think we're seeing progress enough? Do you think it's fast enough? Are we having more balanced stories, especially in the digital space? And what can we do to accelerate the progress when it comes to gender equity?
I don't think it's fast enough. I think we could be making a lot more progress in the media industry, in the digital space. And I do think it's a matter of support from not just people who consume, because a lot of onus is put on the consumers, but also who signs off on content, whether it's huge conglomerates, small businesses, whether it's government initiatives, whether it's NGOs, private institutions, being a bit more curious on how we encourage creatives on the sort of stories that we sign off on the sort of content we encourage content creators to create. I know that's a mouthful, but yeah. I do think that for the most part, to accelerate we need to have just sort of like a collective consciousness at the executive level, from government to large and small private institutions. Yeah.
I like how you just mentioned that the people that make the decisions, the people that pump in the money, because I mean, typically when you follow the money, that's where you would know how to influence. I feel like the biggest influencers are the people that control the money.
Exactly.
Now, what are your thoughts on the people that control the money, from the streamers, in terms of what kind of stories they invest in? What major role do you think they can play, and how can they precisely go about playing that role?
Well, I think the job of what I would call the big money, so like the big naira, the big dollars, is taste making.
Right.
And a difficult thing to do is to go against the grain. And I do think just having diverse voices in decisions on how marketing budget is spent, on how publicity is spent, on how CSR is amplified, is important. And so I do think the role they do have to play is sometimes going against the grain. It might not be the entirety of the budget. It might not, I don't mean turning your back on your current audience, but slowly and surely encouraging an alternative way to look at things, keeping a percentage of the budget to look, why don't we try this instead of what we've always done? Or can we ask a few more questions? Do we need to hire someone who has a different viewpoint? Do we need to have someone who's looking out to see what the pulse of the country is? What are young women thinking about at the moment? What are young men thinking about at the moment? This sort of messaging that we've had over the last 5 years, what has been the reaction? What can we do better? And just going out of their way to cultivate a diverse decision-making group will always help. It feels like a more expensive, it's not as fast, and it is a risk you're taking, but I think it does pay off in the long run all the time.
Okay, if we talk about the UN's development goals, of course, gender equality is part of it. We've had so many, out of the creative space, there's so much being done. Well, I won't say so much, because again, that's very subjective, but things are being done, right, to foster gender equality across all platforms. Now, do you think that beyond those in the creative space, do you think that these bodies, from the foundations to the several bodies all involved in pushing progress for women particularly, do you think that these bodies need to amplify their efforts? And how do you think they can get more investment for the great work that they're doing?
They're doing really good work already. I do think that more can always be done. If you're passionate about something, you will always think more can be done to amplify your interest. And I do think a ton of NGOs are doing well in terms of furthering SDGs, especially gender equality. But I will say that we could be a lot more enthusiastic about the work being done. It's easy to become pessimistic when you're not having grand dramatic changes happen across a country, across a region, across the world in the way you want, how you want. But I do think that I do think that there is, I don't want to sound whiny, because there is a lot of good work being done. And in terms of what they can do to boost, amplify, do better, maybe just increased engagement. I think there's been a lot of doing, engagement and curiosity. So we've been doing a lot of the same things in the same way for a very, very long time. And I do think that we need to try something different. I can't say what exactly that would be, but curiosity will help. Yeah.
And I think you're already doing an amazing job in terms of like just pushing gender equity. So tell us more about the gender equity storytelling.
Oh, okay. So a couple of months ago, I was asked to join something called the Champions Project. It's in collaboration with CC Hub, Joy Inc., and it's been an incredible experience working with a ton of creatives on figuring out how to tell more gender equitable stories. Once you say gender equitable, by the way, people start to roll your eyes and you lose people. But the point really is figuring out how we can tell better stories. So as a podcaster, as a screenwriter, as someone who's passionate about how people see the world and how we can have a more equal world. I've worked with a ton of people in film and music, and we're talking about how we can reflect what we want to see in our writing and in our creativity, given what is already realistically happening. And so it doesn't mean that we're trying to manufacture a world out of thin air, but we're trying to see how, given how people are living at the moment and what we would like to see, what kind of stories can we tell across how people live and work, what makes them hurt, what makes them love, what their hopes and aspirations are, how we can create and amplify stories that show the fullness of humanity,
right,
so that people are encouraged to work together to create like a much better, fairer future.
I love that. And I think it's all our collective responsibility to tell gender equitable stories, because everybody is a storyteller. So long as you communicate with anybody, you are a storyteller. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for the incredible work you and your team are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. And that's all we have for you on this edition of Rubbing Minds. I hope you did enjoy the program. My name is Hero Daniels. Until I catch you next week, hopefully in our Lagos studio. Bye for now.
Distraction, it's all on you now. And just give me some reaction. Just